Daniel sat at his workbench inside the humming engineering bay of the exploration vessel Aurora's Path. He was tightening a plasma coil with careful hands, his brow slightly furrowed. Around him, the low thrum of the ship's reactor mixed with the occasional chatter of crew moving through the corridors. Life aboard the vessel was not easy, but Daniel had grown used to the rhythm of deep space travel. He found comfort in routine and in the company of his crewmates, who came from more species than he could ever have imagined as a child on Earth. Among all of them, the one he trusted the most was Karen. She was a tall, scaled alien from the planet Tovrak, with emerald green patterns that shimmered under light. Her long tail often swayed behind her when she walked, and though she looked intimidating to others, Daniel saw only warmth in her golden eyes. The two of them had bonded during long missions repairing damaged engines and patching systems in the dark. Where others saw a cold reptilian, Daniel saw a loyal companion. That day, Karen entered the engineering bay with a troubled look. She approached him slowly, her claws clicking softly against the floor. Daniel noticed immediately that something was wrong. "You seem worried," Daniel said, putting down his tool. "Did something happen?" Karen lowered her head, a gesture of hesitation among her kind. "The season is near," she said quietly, her voice carrying a rasping undertone. Daniel blinked. "Season?" "My kind," Karen explained, "enters what you humans might call a storm of the body and mind. It comes once every cycle of our sun. Our instincts burn. Our hearts race. We lose focus. Some even lose themselves. It is called the mating season." Daniel tilted his head. The way she spoke, it was not only physical but dangerous. "That sounds difficult," he said carefully. "It is," Karen admitted. "Most of my kind stay with family during this time. They are kept calm, given support, reminded of who they are. Without it," she trailed off, her claws flexing. "Without it, one can fall into rage or despair." Daniel leaned back in his chair, thinking. For Karen to speak so openly, she must have trusted him deeply, and if she had no family here, she would be alone on the ship. He did not want that. "So you need someone to help you through it?" he asked. Karen looked at him, her golden eyes shining with something between hope and fear. "Yes, but I would not force this on you. It is not your burden." Daniel gave a small laugh, shaking his head. "Karen, you've saved me more times than I can count. Remember the coolant leak last month? If you hadn't pulled me out, I'd be space dust by now. Helping you through this is the least I can do." She froze, her scales shifting slightly as if glowing from within. "You would do this for me?" "Of course," Daniel said simply. "Friends look out for each other." For a long moment, Karen did not move. Then she lowered herself until her head was level with his. "On Tovrak, such words mean more than you know," she whispered. Daniel smiled, brushing it off with his usual lightheartedness. "Then I guess you've got a babysitter for the season." But Karen did not smile. She bowed her head, her tail curling around her legs. "I am grateful, truly." From that day forward, Karen rarely left his side. She insisted on sitting with him during meals, even though she disliked human food. She accompanied him on his late-night checks of the ship's reactor. Sometimes she simply sat in silence, watching him work, her presence steady and unshakable. The rest of the crew began to notice. Some teased him, saying he had gained a shadow. Others only gave knowing looks, though Daniel did not understand their meaning. To him, it felt natural. He thought Karen was nervous and needed support, so he gave it. He told her jokes when she seemed restless, showed her old Earth music when she could not sleep, and even taught her a few clumsy human card games. She, in turn, began doing small things for him. His tools were always neatly arranged, his meals already waiting in the mess hall, his uniform cleaned before he asked. At first, Daniel laughed and thanked her, but over time he started to feel a strange weight in her gaze. She looked at him not only with friendship, but with something deeper, something he could not name. Still, he thought nothing of it. After all, he had promised to help her through a hard season. That was what friends did. What Daniel did not realize was that to Karen's people, his promise was not casual. It was a bond, spoken in the language of loyalty and heart. To her, he had done more than agree to keep her company. He had chosen to stand beside her when she was most vulnerable. In her culture, that meant everything. As the days passed, Daniel felt only that he was being a good friend. Karen, however, believed that a new chapter of her life had already begun. She had accepted him fully and completely, and in her mind she would never let him go. Daniel woke up earlier than usual the next morning. The soft hum of the ship's engines filled the cabin, steady and comforting. He stretched, rubbing his eyes, only to notice that Karen was sitting on the floor near his door. Her tall form was curled slightly, tail wrapped around her legs, golden eyes wide open and alert. "Karen," Daniel said in surprise, his voice still groggy. "Have you been there all night?" She nodded calmly. "I did not wish you to wake without me nearby. It is easier when I know you are close." Daniel scratched the back of his neck. "You could have just gone back to your own quarters." "I wouldn't have minded." Her head tilted, scales glinting faintly. "It would not feel right," he sighed, forcing a smile. "All right, but at least come in next time. You'll hurt your back sitting like that." Karen rose smoothly to her feet, towering above him but carrying herself with quiet gentleness. She followed him as he washed, dressed, and prepared for the day. Daniel tried to ignore the way she trailed behind him like a silent guardian. By the time they reached the mess hall, other crewmates were already gathered. Conversations paused briefly as people noticed Karen keeping step with Daniel, her golden gaze fixed firmly on him. The whispers had started yesterday, but today they grew louder. "Looks like she's adopted him," one human technician muttered to another, barely hiding a grin. A Saren officer with blue-tinted skin leaned closer to Daniel as he sat down. "You realize what this means, don't you?" the officer asked with a smirk. Daniel frowned. "It means I'm helping my friend. Nothing else." The officer only chuckled knowingly. Karen, sitting directly beside Daniel, narrowed her eyes at the whispering crew. Her claws tapped against the table, slow and deliberate until the whispers faded. No one wanted to test her mood. Daniel tried to eat, but it was difficult with Karen watching his every bite. She even pushed her own untouched plate toward him, as though making sure he had enough. "Karen," Daniel said softly, "you should eat too." "I am not hungry," she replied. "You must have strength. That is more important." Her tone was calm, but the intensity behind it made Daniel shift uncomfortably. He reminded himself that this was just part of the season, part of what she was going through. She needed reassurance, not distance. Later in engineering, Karen stayed close as Daniel worked. Normally, she helped him lift heavy parts or reach high panels, but today she did not leave his side even when he moved from one console to another. At first, Daniel found it amusing. After the third time, she nearly bumped into him while he bent under a circuit board. It became more awkward than funny. "Karen," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You don't have to guard me like a hawk." "I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him with deep seriousness. "I know, but others might come. They might try to take you away." Daniel blinked. "Take me away? Who's going to do that? We're on the same ship." "You do not see the way they look at you," she said, her voice low and firm. "I see it. I hear their whispers. They would challenge me if I did not stay near." Daniel let out a nervous laugh. "You're imagining things." "They're just curious," but Karen shook her head. "No. On my world, when the bond is declared, rivals test the strength of the claim. I will not allow it." Daniel paused, his wrench still in hand. Something about her words struck him, though he wasn't sure how to answer. To her, this was more than friendship. But he couldn't bring himself to correct her, not while she was so fragile. That evening, the ship's xenobiologist, Dr. Ilian, stopped Daniel in the corridor. The old scientist studied him with sharp eyes. "You do realize what's happening, don't you?" Daniel rubbed his temple. "Everyone keeps saying that, but I don't get it. I promised to help her through this season. That's all." Ilian shook his head. "Among the Tovrak, staying with one of their kind during mating season is no small favor. It is a declaration, a pledge. In their culture, you are not just a helper. You are a partner." The words hit Daniel harder than he expected. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsure how to respond. "But I didn't mean it like that," he finally muttered. "I thought I was just being a good friend." "Intent does not matter as much as action," Ilian said gently. "To Karen, you are already hers. That is why she will not leave you." Daniel walked away from the conversation in silence, his thoughts tangled. When he reached his cabin, Karen was waiting outside again, just as she had that morning. She looked up at him with unshakable devotion, as if nothing in the universe mattered more than him. He forced a smile, trying to push his doubts aside. "You've been here all day, haven't you?" She nodded once. "I will always be here." For the first time, Daniel felt a weight settle on his chest. He had promised to help her, but he was beginning to realize that her idea of his promise was very different from his own. And while he still thought he was only being a friend, Karen was already convinced he belonged to her. Daniel sat alone in the observation deck, staring at the stars that glittered outside the ship's wide glass window. His reflection looked tired, his dark hair messy, his eyes weighed down by confusion. The words of Dr. Ilian kept repeating in his head. To Karen, you are already hers. He thought about the last week. Karen had not left his side for a single moment. She was there in the mess hall, in engineering, in the corridors, even outside his cabin door when he tried to sleep. At first he thought it was just her way of coping with the difficult season. But now, with what the doctor said, he realized there was something much bigger at play. Karen's footsteps echoed behind him. He didn't need to turn around. He already knew it was her. She approached quietly, her tail brushing against the floor. Without asking, she sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. You are restless, she said softly. Daniel forced a smile. Just thinking. That's all? You think too much. Rest your mind. You are safe. I will keep you safe. Her words were gentle, but they made Daniel uneasy. He turned to face her, trying to keep his tone calm. Karen, I need to ask you something. Back on your world, when someone helps during mating season, what does it mean? Karen's eyes lit with a golden glow. It means trust. It means loyalty. It means forever. Daniel's stomach tightened. Forever? Yes, she said firmly. When you gave your word, you gave your bond. In my people's eyes, you are my chosen partner. You promised to walk with me not just through this season, but through all seasons. Daniel blinked, his throat suddenly dry. He had not expected her to say it so plainly. Karen, I think there's a misunderstanding. Where I come from, promises like that don't mean marriage or life bonding. I only meant I'd help you as a friend. That's what humans do. We take care of each other when things get hard. Her head tilted, confusion flashing across her face. Friend, you said you would stay. You said you would not let me face this alone. That is not friendship. That is union. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. He wished the universe had subtitles for cultural misunderstandings. On Earth, friends help each other all the time. If one is sick, we visit them. If one is sad, we cheer them up. It doesn't mean forever. It just means we care. Karen's claws clenched against her knees. Her voice trembled with a mix of hurt and anger. So when you told me I was not alone, when you gave your word, you did not mean it? I did mean it, Daniel said quickly. I meant I'd be here for you. I meant I'd watch your back like you've always done for me, but I didn't mean I was claiming you or binding myself to you. Her eyes narrowed, a storm of emotion swirling within them. Then you tricked me. Daniel shook his head desperately. No, I never wanted to trick you. I didn't know what it meant in your culture. Please believe me. The silence that followed was heavy. Karen turned away, her tail lashing the floor. On Tovrak, words are sacred. Promises are life. To break them is to betray trust. Daniel swallowed hard. He could see the pain in her body language, the stiffness of her scales, the way her golden eyes dimmed. He felt like he had stepped into a pit he couldn't climb out of. He wanted to fix this, but every word seemed to make it worse. Later, in engineering, Daniel tried to focus on his work. He tightened bolts and checked circuits, but Karen's silence weighed on him. She still followed him, still stood close, but she no longer spoke. She no longer laughed at his jokes or asked him about Earth. She just stood there, her gaze cold and distant, as if she was guarding him from the rest of the crew while guarding her own heart from him. The other crewmates noticed. A human officer whispered, "Looks like trouble in paradise." A Saren muttered. He should have studied her customs before agreeing. Daniel tried to ignore them, but their words cut deep. That night, Daniel found himself pacing in his cabin. He couldn't sleep. He thought about leaving things as they were, pretending it would all pass once the season ended. But that wasn't fair to Karen or to himself. She deserved the truth even if it hurt. He opened the door and sure enough, Karen was sitting outside. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. Karen, Daniel said quietly, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to betray you either. But you have to understand. Humans in Tovrak are different. What means forever to you might just mean friendship to me. That doesn't mean I don't care, I do. You're one of the most important people in my life. But I can't give promises I don't understand. For a long time, Karen said nothing. Her eyes searched his face, her golden gaze flickering with pain, anger, and something softer underneath. Finally, she whispered, "If you walk away, I will break. If you stay, I will believe you are mine. There is no middle for me." Daniel's heart ached. He wished he had the right words, but he knew nothing could erase the misunderstanding. He had stepped into a promise without realizing its weight, and now both of them were trapped in the shadow of it. As Karen rose to her feet and walked away without another word, Daniel felt the distance between them growing for the first time, and he feared that if he didn't find a way to bridge it, their friendship, and perhaps the fragile peace of the crew, might not survive. The next few days aboard the Aurora's path felt different for Daniel. Karen no longer laughed with him or asked about Earth. She still stayed near, but there was a tension in the air, like invisible walls built between them. Her presence, once comforting, now felt heavy. Daniel knew it was his fault. His promise had meant something far greater to her than he had understood, and now she struggled with the gap between their two worlds. One morning, Daniel tried to slip into engineering early, hoping to get a head start before Karen arrived. But as soon as he opened the hatch, she was there waiting, leaning against the bulkhead like a silent sentinel. Her golden eyes locked on him. "You did not call me," she said simply. Daniel sighed. "I didn't want to wake you. You deserve rest." "I do not rest when you are gone," she replied. "I cannot." Her voice wasn't angry, it was firm, as though it were simply the truth. Daniel rubbed his forehead and tried not to argue. He entered the engineering bay, and of course Karen followed close behind. Throughout the day, the situation grew more intense. Whenever another crewmate approached Daniel to ask a question or hand him a report, Karen would step forward, placing herself between Daniel and the other person. Her tail flicked, her scales bristled, her body language clear. "Stay away. Karen, please," Daniel whispered at one point, after she hissed at a Saran officer who had merely asked Daniel for a systems check. "You're scaring people. They are too close," she growled softly. "They should know you are mine." Daniel froze, his wrench slipping from his hand. "I'm not, Karen, you can't just say things like that. I don't belong to anyone." Her gaze snapped toward him, hurt flashing in her eyes. But she didn't argue. She only stood taller, folding her arms across her chest. By evening, Daniel felt exhausted, not from work, but from the constant weight of Karen's presence. He decided he needed space, even for an hour. So when Karen turned to retrieve something from her locker, he slipped out quietly and hurried down the corridor. His plan was simple: hide in the observation deck and breathe. But Karen found him within minutes. Daniel nearly jumped when she appeared in the doorway, golden eyes blazing. "Why did you run?" she demanded. "I didn't run," Daniel insisted, holding up his hands. "I just needed time to think." Her voice was low, trembling with emotion. "You would leave me alone?" "You promised you would not." Daniel's heart raced. He tried to stay calm. "Karen, I just needed a little space. That doesn't mean I'm abandoning you." But she didn't seem to hear. She stepped closer, her claws clicking against the floor, her body tense as if ready to fight anyone who came near. For the first time, Daniel felt real fear, not of Karen hurting him, but of how far her instincts might push her. The tension only grew worse when the crew noticed what was happening. In the mess hall the next day, Daniel sat at a table with his food tray, trying to relax. A young technician from Earth came over, smiling nervously. "Mind if I sit?" Before Daniel could answer, Karen moved, placing her hand on the table with a thud. "No," she said flatly. The technician froze. Daniel stood quickly. "Karen, stop! You can't." She was too close, Karen hissed, her voice rising. Her scales shimmered as her body stiffened with protective energy. "They think they can take you from me." "I will not allow it." The room went silent. All eyes turned toward them. Daniel felt heat crawl up his neck. "Karen, please, sit down." But Karen did not move until the technician retreated. Only then did she sit, her tail curling protectively around her chair. She ate nothing, only kept watch over Daniel, daring anyone to approach. Daniel wanted to shout, wanted to tell her she was making everything worse. But when he saw the raw desperation in her eyes, his anger faded into pity. She wasn't doing this to hurt him. She was doing it because in her mind he was her anchor, her chosen one. Losing him would mean losing herself. That night, Daniel tried once more to talk to her. In the quiet corridor outside his cabin, he faced her directly. "Karen, this isn't working. You can't follow me every second. You can't fight everyone who talks to me. That's not friendship. That's... He hesitated, searching for the right word. That's too much. Karen's chest rose and fell heavily. Her voice cracked when she spoke. You think I do not see your fear? You think I want to chase you? But I cannot stop. My blood burns. My heart screams that you are mine. And if I let you go, I will break apart. Her confession silenced him. For the first time, Daniel truly understood the weight she carried. It wasn't just culture. It was instinct. Something powerful inside her that she could not control. She wasn't only choosing this. She was fighting her own nature every moment just to keep from overwhelming him further. Daniel's chest tightened. He stepped closer, speaking softly. Karen, I don't want you to break. But I can't be a prisoner either. We need to find a balance. Her golden eyes shimmered with pain. She whispered, Then help me find it. Daniel nodded slowly, though uncertainty twisted in his stomach. He didn't know how to bridge this gap between them. But he knew one thing. If he didn't try, both of them would fall apart. For now, all he could do was stand beside her, hoping that somewhere between his idea of friendship and her idea of forever, they could discover a path neither would regret. The Aurora's path drifted silently through deep space, its hull glowing faintly in the light of a distant star. For several days, Daniel had been trying to find a fragile balance with Karen. She still followed him, still guarded him. But after their last talk, she had begun to hold back a little. She no longer hissed at crewmates who approached him. Though her eyes always watched closely, Daniel hoped things were improving, even if the air between them remained heavy. But peace never lasted long in the void. The alarm blared suddenly one afternoon while Daniel was running diagnostics in engineering. Red lights flashed along the walls and the voice of the captain echoed through the ship. All crew to stations. We are under attack. Unknown vessels approaching fast. Daniel's heart jumped. He grabbed his tool belt, not because it would help in a fight, but because he never went anywhere without it. Karen appeared at his side in an instant, her scales bristling, golden eyes burning like fire. Stay behind me, she commanded. Daniel swallowed hard. Karen, this isn't the time. We need to help the crew. You are my priority, she growled. I will not let harm touch you. Before Daniel could argue, the ship shook violently. The floor rattled under his boots as enemy fire struck the hull. He heard the sound of metal tearing somewhere deep inside the vessel. The Aurora's path returned fire, but within moments the announcement came. Boarders detected. Prepare for close combat! Daniel's blood ran cold. He had trained for emergencies, but he was no soldier. His job was fixing engines, not fighting invaders. He looked at Karen, who was already crouched low, muscles tensed, claws ready. The corridor outside erupted with chaos. Armed figures in dark armor forced their way in, their weapons sparking as they fired at crew members. The sound of energy blasts filled the air. Daniel ducked, heart pounding, as the battle spilled into the engineering section. One of the boarders spotted him and raised a weapon. Daniel froze, knowing he couldn't react fast enough. But Karen moved like lightning. She lunged forward with a roar that shook the walls. Her claws slashed through the weapon, sparks flying, and with one sweep of her tail she knocked the attacker into the bulkhead with a sickening thud. Stay down, she barked at Daniel. He dropped to the floor, covering his head as the fight raged around him. Karen was unstoppable. She tore through the boarders with raw strength and fierce precision, her body moving with both grace and fury. Every time an enemy aimed at Daniel, she was there, blocking the shot, knocking them away, shielding him with her own body. Daniel tried to crawl toward a console to trigger the emergency shields, but another boarder grabbed him by the arm, pulling him back. The enemy snarled, dragging him upright. Panic surged through Daniel, but before he could even shout, Karen slammed into the attacker with a roar. She struck so hard that both the boarder and Daniel went crashing to the ground. She crouched over him, claws extended, fangs bared at the enemy, who scrambled back in terror before fleeing. Then her gaze turned to Daniel, and in her golden eyes he saw something raw, fear not for herself but for him. You are hurt? She demanded, her claws trembling as they brushed his arm. Daniel shook his head quickly. No, I'm fine. Just shaken. Karen's body seemed to tremble with relief. She pulled him to his feet, keeping one arm firmly around him as though he might vanish if she let go. Stay with me, she said again. Always with me. The battle dragged on for what felt like hours, though it was likely only minutes. The crew of the Aurora's path, with Karen's fury at the center, pushed the boarders back until the last of them retreated to their ship. The vessel shuddered one final time as the enemy fled, leaving only silence behind. When the alarm finally went quiet, Daniel stood in the wreckage of engineering, his chest heaving. Sparks showered from damaged panels, smoke filled the air, and bodies, injured but alive, were scattered around. In the middle of it all stood Chiron, her scales streaked with black from burns, her claws still dripping with energy residue. She turned to Daniel slowly, her breathing ragged. "You are safe. That is all that matters." Daniel looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time he saw past the possessiveness and misunderstanding. He saw devotion. He saw a friend who had risked everything, who would always risk everything for him. Her protection wasn't just instinct. It was heart. His throat tightened. "Chiron, thank you. You saved my life." Her claws shook as she reached out, touching his shoulder with surprising gentleness. "You are my life. I could not let them take you." The words struck him deeply. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he didn't belong to her. But after what she had just done, after the way she had thrown herself into danger without hesitation, he couldn't bring himself to say it. Instead, he placed his hand over hers. "I'll stay," he whispered. "I won't leave you." Her golden eyes glowed brighter than ever, shimmering with relief and fierce joy. And in that moment, Daniel realized the truth. No matter how complicated things were, no matter how tangled their cultures made this bond, he didn't want her to let go. Not now. Not ever. The ship was quiet after the battle, though the air still carried the smell of smoke and burned metal. Engineers worked in the corridors, sealing broken panels and patching energy lines. Medics rushed past with stretchers tending to the injured. The Aurora's path had survived, but only just. Daniel sat in the medbay, his arm bandaged from a cut he hadn't even noticed during the fight. His mind was still racing, not from the pain, but from the memory of Karen standing in front of him like an unbreakable shield. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her leaping into danger without hesitation. Karen stood only a few steps away, refusing to rest even though her scales bore burns and cracks. She had been ordered by the captain to stay in the medbay until her wounds were treated, but she kept her golden eyes fixed on Daniel, as though afraid he might vanish if she blinked. "You should lie down," Daniel told her gently. "You're hurt worse than me." She shook her head firmly. "I am strong. I heal quickly." "You are the one I must watch," Daniel sighed. It was always the same with her. She didn't care about her own pain, only his safety. At first it had felt overwhelming, even suffocating. But after the battle, he could no longer deny that her devotion came from something deeper. He lowered his voice. "Karen, why are you like this? Why do you cling to me so much? I need to understand." Karen's eyes softened, and for the first time since he had met her, she seemed uncertain. She looked down, her claws curling as if searching for words. "On my world," she said slowly, "our people do not take bonds lightly. When we find someone who gives us peace, someone who makes the storms quiet inside, we hold on. You gave me kindness when I was weak. You stayed when others would have left. That is why I cannot let you go." Her words struck Daniel's heart. He remembered their first days together, how she had struggled during her difficult season and how he had simply tried to comfort her. He had not thought it was much, but for her it had meant everything. "Karen," he said softly. "I didn't know it mean that much to you. Where I come from, helping a friend is just what you do." She tilted her head, confusion flickering in her gaze. "Among your people, such loyalty is common?" Daniel nodded. "At least it should be. We try to take care of each other not because we expect something back, but because it's the right thing to do." Karen was silent for a long time, processing his words. Then she stepped closer, lowering herself so her eyes met his at level. "Then perhaps I must learn more of your ways. If staying close causes you pain, I will try to hold less tightly." Daniel blinked in surprise. It was the first time she had ever suggested loosening her grip. He could see the effort in her expression, the struggle to balance her instinct with respect for him. "I don't want you to stop caring," he said carefully. "I just want balance. You don't have to guard me every second. You can trust me to stand on my own sometimes." Karen studied him, her tail flicking slowly across the floor. Finally, she nodded. "Balance, yes, I can try this." Relief washed over Daniel. For the first time since their bond had formed, he felt they were moving toward understanding. That night, the crew gathered in the mess hall for a quiet meal. The ship was damaged, supplies were thin, but everyone needed a moment of peace. Daniel sat with Karen at his side, but this time she didn't block others from joining their table. A human pilot sat across from them and even dared to crack a joke. Karen narrowed her eyes at first, but when Daniel laughed, she hesitated, then gave a low chuckle of her own. It was a small step, but Daniel noticed. She was trying. Later, as the stars passed outside the wide viewing windows, Daniel and Karen stood together in silence. He could feel the weight of her presence beside him, powerful yet oddly calm. "Karen," he said softly. "I don't know what the future will look like, but I want us to find it together as equals, not as guard and prisoner, but as friends." She looked at him with eyes that shimmered like molten gold. "Friends," she repeated, tasting the word. Then she added, "and perhaps more when you are ready." Daniel smiled faintly, not making promises, but not pulling away either. "We'll see. One step at a time." Karen gave a slow, rumbling purr, a sound Daniel had come to recognize as her version of a smile. For the first time, he felt that the bond between them was not a chain, but a bridge. A fragile bridge, perhaps, but one strong enough to carry them forward. As the ship continued its long journey through the stars, Daniel realized something important. He had thought he was only helping her once, back when her season had made her vulnerable. But now, as they stood side by side, he understood that helping had never ended. It was not a single act, but a choice he would keep making. Again and again, and Karen, in her fierce, unshakable way, was learning to make the same choice. The Aurora's path moved steadily through the void, stars streaming past the observation windows. The ship had been repaired and the crew had settled back into their routines, though whispers about the bond between Daniel and Karen still lingered. Daniel had grown used to Karen's presence, and she had learned to respect some of his space, though her golden eyes never left him for long. That morning, Daniel worked in engineering, checking power relays. Karen stood nearby, quiet but alert. Unlike before, she did not hover unnervingly close. She simply observed, ready to help if needed. Daniel appreciated the balance they had found. "You've improved at giving space," he said with a faint smile, tightening a circuit cover. Karen tilted her head, a small glimmer of amusement in her eyes. "You are pleased. Good, I can practice patience for you." Daniel laughed softly, the sound echoing in the bay. "You've done more than that. You saved my life, Karen, more than once. I think patience comes naturally to you when it matters." Her eyes softened, and for a moment she seemed almost human in expression. "I only do what I must." Before he could respond, the ship's alarm sounded, a warning this time, not an emergency. Daniel frowned and glanced at the display. "Minor turbulence from a nearby asteroid field," he said. "Nothing dangerous." Karen's tail flicked behind her, cautious but calm. "We will navigate together. The word lingered in Daniel's mind. It captured what they had been building over the past weeks, an understanding that went beyond species, culture, or instinct. They had found a rhythm. He had learned to respect her devotion, and she had learned to trust his judgment. Later, during their rest period, Daniel and Karen walked along the observation deck. Stars stretched in long trails past the wide windows. It was quiet, and Daniel finally allowed himself to speak openly. "Karen," he began, "I've been thinking about us, about everything that happened." She stopped and turned to him, her scales shimmering softly in the starlight. "You do not need to explain. We survived." "That is enough." "No," Daniel said, shaking his head. "It's not enough. I need you to understand that I care for you deeply, but I want it to be a choice. I don't want to ever feel like you're holding me by instinct alone. I want us to choose each other." Karen blinked slowly. "Choice?" "Yes," Daniel said. "I want our bond to be real. Not because your instincts demand it, or because my promise was misunderstood, but because we both want it." For a long moment, Karen considered his words. Her golden eyes searched his face, looking for any trace of deceit, and found none. Slowly, she stepped closer, lowering herself so their heights aligned more comfortably. "I do not know how to speak like your people," she admitted quietly, "but I feel it. I feel the desire to stay, to protect, to walk beside you. And now you say it must be chosen, not demanded." Daniel nodded. "Yes, and I choose you too, Karen. Not because I promised, not because I was scared you'd follow me, but because I want to." Her tail wrapped around the small space between them, and she allowed herself a small smile, a rare sight for her kind. Then we walked together, human. Together as equals. Daniel felt a warmth he had never known. It wasn't just relief or admiration. It was something stronger, something that had grown slowly over the weeks of fear, misunderstanding, and shared danger. He had entered this with the intent of helping a friend. Now he realized that helping had become a bridge between two lives, two hearts, two worlds. Over the next few hours, they walked along the observation deck in silence, letting the stars speak for them. There was no need for more words. Every glance, every step, every flick of Karen's tail beside him spoke of a bond built on trust, choice, and mutual respect. Later, the rest of the crew gathered for the evening meal. Daniel and Karen joined them side by side, not possessively, not with tension, but proudly. Their companionship was evident, but it was no longer a shadow hanging over everyone else. It was a promise, chosen freely, understood clearly. As the ship glided on, Daniel looked at Karen, her golden eyes reflecting the distant suns, and he realized something important. This bond, the friendship, the devotion, the choice was more than survival, more than instinct. It was a story of two beings from different worlds learning, growing, and finding common ground. And in that moment he knew they had crossed something remarkable. They had taken the chaos, the confusion, the danger, and transformed it into trust, into loyalty, into a connection neither had expected but both now cherished. Karen leaned slightly against him, tail brushing his leg gently, and whispered, "Human, I'm glad the stars brought us together." Daniel smiled, his hand brushing over hers. "So am I, Karen. So am I." As the Aurora's path sailed through the endless expanse, Daniel and Karen walked side by side, not because the season demanded it, not because of misunderstanding or instinct, but because they had chosen each other, and in the vastness of space that choice made all the difference. The stars stretched on forever, but in that moment Daniel realized they had found their own little forever too.